do lunch this semester because of COVID.
Of course, of course.
I didn't want everyone mowing
You
down,
can't have
but
those
maybe
yummy sandwiches anymore.
maybe I gotta go back to the drawing board or give everyone like some kind of liquid meal that they
There
can
you go.
slurp through a straw under their mask. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Just gotta space out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to have Tony's job when I was a student.
Oh, you did? Cool. Yeah.
He had crazy sandwiches. That
Oh, the
number one.
vegetarian
Yeah.
sandwiches
Well,
like
the-
10 years ago were more.
The deli shut down.
Yeah.
The one
Yeah, Fricanos. Terrible business. Terrible business that closed. Fantastic.
Yeah.
business.
Great sandwich itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice lady. You're on camera. Yeah, you're fine.
Cole, you're gonna let me know
Rest in
we're
peace,
we're
Fricanos.
good?
We're good to go. Yeah,
Okay,
if
sweet.
you guys want to do the intro.
Okay, great. So thanks everyone for coming. Today we've got a panel presentation featuring staff from City of Austin's Parks and Recreation Department. So up here on stage we have Tom Rowlinson and Robin Hymans. And then in the audience from the same department we have Scott Grantham and Justin Stewart. And they're going to share about some of the great work that they're doing related to creating new parks via the Parkland Dedication mechanism that requires new development to devote land to parks or to pay a fee in lieu of the dedication. So I'll turn it over to Tom and Robin. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We're honored. So, yeah, I can just kick it off a little bit. So, Robin and I have been working on Parkland Dedication with the city for about 3+ years now, and really it's a great opportunity to expand our park system, and we really appreciate a chance to explain how it works and give y'all a real detailed look into how we're able to grow our park system throughout Austin.
So I'm Robin Hymans. I've been with the Parks Department for 3-ish years now. We do site plan and subdivision review related to the Parkland Dedication Ordinance that we're going to talk about today. So we developed this story map, and hopefully you guys can all see the presentation. We developed this story map as a tool to sort of navigate through this kind of complex ordinance. The desired audience is kind of everybody, so it's council members, it's stakeholders, it's community members, it's Parks Board members, it's students, it's kind of, and then it's also the development community, so that everyone can kind of be on the same page about what this great ordinance does and what the requirements are, so that you can kind of navigate through. We developed this through an Esri story map, so it integrates all of our kind of heavy data maps into sort of a rich picture format that's easy to follow along to. You can navigate it, it's a website, it's a public website, and you can navigate it through these tabs at the top, and you can access it at any time, and we do regular updates to it as well, so it stays current. So, as for the Parkland Dedication Ordinance, Austin is growing, as you all know, so here is our skyline in 2013. And then if you slide across, this is our skyline in 2019, and it even looks different today. So you can see this very rapid growth. I think it's something like 30% since the last census. So it's a very rapidly growing city, and so as the city grows, we need to have something in place to make sure that the Parks Department can keep up with the level of service. We all know people are moving here because of our great park system, and so we want to make sure that that service is maintained. So when we do that, we utilize the Parkland Dedication Ordinance, which ties the number of new residential multifamily hotel units directly to a requirement to dedicate land or pay a fee in lieu, which we'll go into, in order to maintain a level of service of 9.4 acres per 1,000 people. You can find more out about the history of Parkland Dedication, read the ordinances, really dig deep into all of these details through our Parkland Dedication website, which is here. So the purpose of Parkland Dedication, it's a local government requirement to new residential development to provide new parkland in order to provide parkland within a 5 or 10 minute walk of all Austinites, to distribute high quality parkland equitably across the city, to integrate open space into a compact and connected city, and create a healthy community with ample recreational opportunities. And these goals are derived from council resolutions, they're derived from our long-range plans and the Imagine Austin vision for our city. So I'm going to go through a quick overview of the process, and then we'll go into each section in more detail. So when new development comes in, it's residential or hotel motel, there's a need generated for new parkland. So the new residents coming in generate a need for new parkland. And so each one of those new developments come through maybe as a site plan or a subdivision or a PUD, planned unit development, and they go through dedication criteria. The Parks and Recreation Department, the staff, us and Scott and Justin, go through this dedication criteria as it's outlined in the code and determine how the development will satisfy parkland dedication. There's 3 ways to satisfy this requirement. The first is land dedication, so they can dedicate a portion of their land on site. When we look at land dedication, we're looking for things like access and connectivity, expanding access into existing parks through maybe a trail along the side of their building, or we're looking for a new community park to serve the needs, so a pocket park or a neighborhood park on the site of the development. The next way to satisfy it is through fees in lieu of parkland dedication. There's 2 fees. The first is a land fee that helps the Parks Department go through and purchase land, acquire parkland throughout the city. And then there's also development fees, which goes toward developing new park amenities, playgrounds, basketball courts, trails, etc. You can also satisfy parkland dedication with a combination of land dedication, so maybe a portion is satisfied with a small dedication of like a 1/4 acre pocket park, and then the remaining is satisfied with the fees in lieu of parkland dedication. But in all circumstances, any new residential development that comes in results in a new or improved park, which is very exciting for Austin. So I'll play this quick video. It just sort of gives you an overview of all the different parks that we've, or just kind of highlight some of the parks that we've acquired through this ordinance. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tom, and he'll go into more detail about each of these subjects.
Thanks, Robin. So yeah, we're going to take you on a journey that new developments go through when it comes to parkland dedication. So starting with any new real estate development that's going to have a residential or hotel component that's adding to our city's growth, the first thing we really start to look at is what are going to be the dedication criteria. So this is what the Parks Department is looking for in a new residential development as far as parkland needs. So we have a few different criteria that we use to really assess these new developments. Really, the overarching criterion, I guess, is whether this site is going to be suitable for parkland. Is there something that the city needs as far as a connection or an expansion for parkland, or is there a critical need? Are we lacking parks in this area that an on-site dedication would be needed, as opposed to simply paying a fee in lieu into the city's coffers to go purchase parkland? So these are some of the criteria. One of the biggest criteria that we look at is something called park deficiency or park deficient areas. So really, those are parts of the city that are outside of walking distance to parks currently. We really have a goal to make sure all residents in Austin are within a 5 to 10 minute walk of parks. Within the urban core, that's 5 minutes. Outside of that, it's about 10 minutes. And we've been able to map that, and there's an interactive web map that y'all can explore at any time that looks at where this park deficiency is located. I'll open it up so you can get a better look. But essentially the pink tone is what we refer to as park deficiency, and the sort of yellow tone is the walk sheds. So the way we generate this analysis is through network analysts. So we really create walk sheds for all of our parks that are equal to 5 or 10 minutes. And then what the areas that are outside of those are determined as park deficient. So this is actually a relatively new tool that we started to use to better match City Council's direction as well as our resolutions to make sure that all residents are within a 5 to 10 minute walk. We used to do it with just kind of a spatial buffer, but it wasn't as accurate. So this really gives us a clear picture of where are we lacking parks, where is there additional connectivity that we could reach in our park system. So that's really one of the primary criteria we look at when we're determining whether a fee in lieu or on-site dedication is going to be required. So in instances where fees are allowed, we really have two types. One is going to be the fee in lieu of land. So as Robin mentioned, those are the funds that we use to go out and buy parkland specifically, new properties that is going to serve the residents. But we also have a development fee that we use for capital investments, so new amenities, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. So we've been really successful using our land fee in lieus. So we've managed to purchase thousands of acres of parkland, in conjunction with city bonds. But we've got a great gallery that you can explore. I think it may be already open. Let's see. If not, we could take a look.
For this town.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so we've highlighted some of the parks that we've been able to buy. Most of these are within the last couple of years. Really great opportunities where our fees in lieu have been able to expand our park system. And one we like to highlight is this section of Slaughter Creek that you see in this little video here. The tranquil bliss that comes with new parkland. So the other component to our fees that we require from new developments is the development fee. So like I said, this is really for capital improvements, things like trails, playgrounds, and sports courts and ball fields. And we also have a few projects that we like to highlight in the story map. So Auditorium Shores Trailhead, Battle Bend Neighborhood Park, Armadillo Neighborhood Park are all amenities or parks that we were able to improve the amenities or install new amenities based on the investments that we gained from the park development. We also have a lot of community partners that we fund through these fees. So one of the big ones we like to talk about is Conservation Corps. So we've got green belts all over town that they're completely undeveloped. They may be overgrown with bamboo or other invasive species that basically makes them unusable. But we're able to fund Conservation Corps. There's a lot of youth who are getting their foot in this kind of business, and they go out and trailblaze for us and remove some of the invasive species and turn a completely unusable park or green belt into something with functional trails. And one example we like to highlight, we were able to get this fantastic playscape at Battle Bend Neighborhood Park that was funded through our park development fees. So a new playscape that wouldn't have otherwise existed without this requirement for projects in the area. Looking at our fees and how we've collected them and the amounts over the last 10 odd years, you can see from this chart going back to fiscal year 2011, 2012 to the very past fiscal year, we've steadily increased the amount of Parkland Dedication funds that we've collected up to over $14 million in the last fiscal year. So as the city grows, we're getting more funds to invest in our park system. Really, this is attributable to 2 points. The first one is, of course, the enormous growth that we're seeing in the city. So as the city has new development and those developments pay into our Parkland Dedication system, those fees that we have increase. The other thing is that we passed a new Parkland Dedication ordinance. City Council passed it back in 2016, and that ordinance really tweaked the requirements to better match the impact to our park system. So before it was kind of a fixed rate amount that didn't really reflect what the cost on the ground was for our park system, and now the ordinance is better tied to, you know, a target that, you know, really reflects what it's costing us today to go out and buy parkland and make these park investments. When it comes to spending these Parkland dedication funds, we use a lot of different tools, and we have several factors that we're looking at. I guess the number one thing we're always looking at is the most equitable impact that our investments can make to the community here in Austin. So we look at demographics such as race and income and ethnicity. We also look at population density, critical connections to existing parks, the density of children, as well as park deficiency, which I mentioned earlier, and then proximity to new development and growth. So we use some demographic tools that you can explore a little bit. These are all just typical census information, but it overlays some of those criteria or those factors that I just mentioned. We do have a few other data sets that we look at. We use land use as well, so we're able to really target block by block or even house by house where we want to make those park investments, which is great because we can then report back to the public and to council when we do make new park investments, you know, that we're going to serve 2,000 new residents or we're going to serve 3,000 residents, whichever, with the park investment that we make, and, you know, break that down by demographics.
What's the
even
red
further.
area there?
Where?
Yes.
In the center, that's West Campus.
Ah.
So West Campus is very, very dense with a lot of, you know, quote unquote lower income students. So it's an interesting area that we're definitely exploring. But yeah, West Campus, it's close to Shoal Creek and it's close to campus, so it's got an interesting mix of needs as far as parkland. That's a great question. Thanks, Justin. The other factor that we look at is where we can expend the funds. So Parkland Dedication is quite specific thanks to American case law about where we're able to make parkland investments. So really it needs to be tied to where those new residents are going. There's a geographic component. So really those new residents that are paying into our park system, or those new developments that are paying into our park system, need to be able to easily access. There should be, you know, an essential nexus to those residents and the facilities that they're getting. So I'm sure y'all have covered, or maybe will soon cover, Nolan and Dolan and planning law. So this is directly tied to those cases, and we talk of them quite often. This map here shows where all the fees are collected. Every star that you see is a different new development that is paid into our park system, and you can see exactly where they are. You can click on any of them to see what project they're associated with. And this is a great opportunity for developers who want to see, hey, what's going on, where are the fees that I paid, where are they going into. It's also a great opportunity for community groups who maybe want to make investments in their neighborhood and see, okay, maybe there are some funds nearby that are available that we could use for a project that they have in mind. And then, of course, we use this to make sure that we're meeting our spending criteria, that we're within those geographic regions where the fees were collected, and we're meeting the needs of those new residents. Finally, just looking at where we've made investments in our Parkland acquisitions over the last 30, 40 years. You can see this is a heat map that shows the amount of investment that we've put into acquisitions, and the yellow parcels are the acquisitions that we've made through time. So we recently put this together to see where we've historically made our parkland investments through purchases, whether it's bond or fee in lieu. And what we were able to learn is that, you know, over 80% of the acreage that we've purchased going back to 1998 has been in the Eastern Crescent. So you just see from the geographic distribution, you know, since the 90s we've been working to rectify some of those historic injustices as far as parkland investment.
So now I'll talk a little bit about actual land dedication. So as I said before, one of the ways to satisfy this code requirement for new developments is by dedicating land on their site. So we kind of look for that in two ways. I'll just show you an example here. This is Goodnight Ranch Pocket Park, and it is part of a planned unit development, a new development subdivision, Goodnight Ranch in southeast Austin. And they are responsible for kind of developing an entire park system. So they've got nodes of pocket parks and neighborhood parks, as well as long trails that connect them. This is a little pocket park that's in a neighborhood. It's got a nature play kind of feature. There's houses that face onto this park. And then along the side, you can see a drainage easement. And so we've sort of integrated this park into the drainage requirements so that we can kind of gain the benefit of additional open space. There's educational opportunities for the kiddos that are playing down here. I know I grew up playing in creeks and learning about things through that. And then this is obviously sort of this drainage easement or the swale is sort of designed so that it has a lot of plant life rather than just being a concrete flume to convey the water. So we sort of look at a holistic approach of how we can integrate these requirements into other requirements that the site development permit might be facing. And I think this is a really successful example of that. So when we look for parkland for connectivity, this is kind of what we're talking about. So we look at parkland through the view of a walk shed. We want to make sure everyone's within a 5 or 10 minute walk to the park. We have, in this example, an existing park here. This park is fully developed. It's ready to go. But the blue represents the existing walk shed. So only the people in the blue, because of the street network, you know, Austin street network isn't great, because of dead ends, etc. Only the people in the blue are able to actually access this park by a quarter-mile walk. Everybody else is sort of cut off from it. And so we work with new developments, that's the orange, to actually expand a new trail. So we punch through the kind of building setback of their property. There's no impact to the development whatsoever. And we're able to have them build with their development fees a new trail and maybe some benches or park signage. And all of a sudden the purple shows the new walk shed. So now all these people are able to access this park through these very simple interventions along the sides of the building. And I think this is one of the most critical parts of our dedication ordinance is these critical connections and expanding this access. So without this ordinance, you know, all these people would be cut off, and we wouldn't have the same type of park service.
And those developments might be gated without this, right?
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
can you talk to kind of I mean, it's actually blending communities by nabeighborhoods are getting in touch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always require. So sometimes the developments still put up a fence, but the park easement itself cannot be fenced, and we always require that they have some kind of access through their fence for their residents to access these park trails. So if, you know, it does create an opportunity to sort of like break through this super block, which would otherwise be fenced, and even in the case where the developer kind of fences within this orange area outside of the parkland, we always do require that connection. So it does sort of kind of open up opportunities and has the developer thinking about how are we connecting this neighborhood to the rest of the amenities and the services in this neighborhood, rather than just thinking on a site scale. They're kind of thinking on their local area scale. Another example of this is Country Club Creek Trail. This is on Riverside and Montopolis. And this trail provides access from Riverside to Montopolis off street. So you're behind the building, you're kind of running along the creek here. And this is a great opportunity for people that are working at home all day, maybe take walking meetings, phone calls out here. They call your mom, you know, you gotta call her, check in, walk up and down this trail. There's also a great opportunity to connect from one bus to another off street. It's safer. You can teach a kid to ride a bike back here, take your dog for a walk. So it's a really small intervention. It's just this little trail in the back, but it does provide really meaningful open space for the residents as well as the surrounding neighborhood because it's all got a public access easement on it. I think in this case, the developer maintains it, which is another benefit.
I see a manhole there, so sometimes you're challenged to allow these access or these dedications to be kind of let on top of easements. Could you talk to that?
That's absolutely right. So this is likely also in a drainage easement. So what we do, kind of what I was talking about with Goodnight Ranch is we kind of bundle all these community benefits, all these assets into the parkland and design it in a way where there's very minimal impact. So those manholes may be accessed but once every 20 years for maintenance, so they don't disrupt the use of the park, but we're able to work with the developer to kind of find all the code requirements of their site and bundle them up so that we're kind of producing the best outcome for the park and for the community and for the infrastructure that has to go in with the most minimal impact to the actual development as we can.
I heard there was talks of connecting this trail all the way to the trail off of the Pleasant Valley.
This Country Club Creek Trail.
Oh, through Roy G. Guerrero and the golf course?
Yeah, and then like through the apartment complex, like along the actual creek.
Yeah, actually, just on the other side of the street of that trail, we're hopefully finishing up another dedication that's at the corner between Country Club Creek Road and Grove Boulevard, I think. You're so close.
Yeah, I'm so close. There we go. So there we go.
Yeah, so
this is the trail that's in the picture, and then yeah, there's.
So we're continuing to expand Country Club Creek to the north. I don't know what we're gonna do with the ACC golf course. I haven't broached the subject with them, but yeah, that's always the goal. Creeks are one of our highest priorities. That's established through decades of community input, and of course our parks and recreation long-range plan. And yeah, we're also looking at Country Club Creek to the south, and we work with transportation and public works on those two. I guess going the other direction back towards Grove and to the south toward Old Dorf.
Awesome, thank you.
And that's a major part of our review. So we review every single project that comes in as a team so that we can have a holistic vision of what's going on. We rely heavily on mapping and marking what's going on in our mapping system so that we can kind of look at these large connections, opportunities, look at where people are actually connecting into parks, what kind of facilities are in those parks, maybe we need another park with a different kind of facility, that kind of thing. So creeks are absolutely a #1 priority for connectivity. Okay, so then the other thing that we look at is new community parks. So we can look through the park dedication gallery. There's some dedicated parks from the last couple of years, Triangle Park, Lawrence Street Park. So these are sort of scattered throughout town where new development is happening. One example of a community park, this is just sort of, it's a 1/4 acre or more typically, that will provide some kind of community recreation or gathering space, a dog park, opportunity for a playscape. This is Saltillo Plaza, and this one again is sort of bundling many community assets. So it's sort of a Acre rail crossing. This in the center is large rain gardens to manage the stormwater. You can see the Acre crossing here. This entire thing is sort of part of the parkland, and this is part of sort of this huge development's Parkland dedication requirements. They also have a paseo through the middle and a couple other little pocket parks. But it's really heavily used by workout groups and people walking their dogs, and it's not huge, but it's a great sort of little respite and a sort of very urban plaza type park in the middle of the city. So the main goal with these parks, typically for these site plans, these large multifamily site plans, is to provide just sort of that little respite from and relief from urban life, dotted throughout the city. So in all of these scenarios, we end in a new park. That's yours.
Yeah. So the takeaway we like to give folks is Parkland Dedication. It's a dynamic, context-sensitive tool to grow our park system. It's really what we hope is the primary mechanism that we use to grow our park system. We do also have bonds every couple of years, but we really try to use this program to our best of our ability to expand the city in a way that's proportional, expand our parkland in a way that's proportional to the city's growth. And, you know, that growth is by some estimates up to 35,000 new residents annually. So, again, it provides funding for Parkland Acquisition, it provides new parks through on-site dedication, and also our capital park amenities and park development and community programs. And really, it gives us an opportunity with the city to forge meaningful partnerships with the development community, as well as neighborhood groups, neighborhood contact teams, and just residents generally, to create a healthy, compact, and connected city that was contemplated in the City of Austin's comprehensive plan of Action Austin.
So we have a map prepared that sort of really shows the impact of this ordinance. So when we look at Parkland Dedication, we're looking at all the projects in orange are mapped, and they've either been acquired through the fees, they've been developed with new park amenities through the fees, or they've been dedicated by a developer as part of their requirements. So that's the one that we were just looking at, and they're all kind of, you can click on and explore all of them. But the main point that we want you to take away is as we zoom out, you can really see the impact of this Parkland Dedication ordinance on our city's park system. So without this ordinance, we'd be relying on general fund and bonds to sort of keep up with the growth of the city, which is not really feasible. And now those kinds of funds can be used to augment the work that we do with Parkland Dedication, but they can also be focused on other things like ongoing maintenance. And so it's really important that this ordinance, which is one of the strongest ordinances in Texas, sort of remains in place and remains, that we can all see the benefit of this ordinance on our park system, because it's really a pretty significant impact, and in some cases it's thousands of acres being dedicated that are conserving floodplains, protecting, you know, like natural areas, providing parkland in areas that were historically underserved. So there's a lot of benefits to this program. And then we can also just kind of show you quickly, I need to make the 2021 year in review, but 2020 was a great year too. And we sort of have 12 new dedicated parks, 75 acres of new parkland, 20 parks developed with Parkland Dedication. So it's a really rapid growth. We started with about 300 parks, and now we have 330, I think, over the last couple of years. So it's a pretty significant increase in the number of parks that we're bringing into our system. And then you can kind of explore all of those. Through here you can kind of see how the fees were expended. And then we have a couple of featured parks. One is Fontaine Plaza at the Highland, in Highland. Highland has sort of a system of parks. This is a great little plaza. It used to be when Highland Mall was here, this was just sort of a big grassy median. And they've sort of activated it as a park space, and it's well lit, and it's a really nice kind of hangout spot. Tom purchased the historic Wood Street property, which is right on Shoal Creek, right by the GSD&M building, which had historic Hispanic and also African American settlements on it. So it's an important historic piece of property, but it also will allow us to provide better accessible ADA access down into Shoal Creek in this area. So it's a really important, great purchase. And then in park development, we developed Georgian Acres Neighborhood Park, which has a lot of really fun, funky play elements, as well as some sports courts and walking trails and stuff. And so that park was fully purchased with Parkland Dedication fees and developed with it. So it's a really great intervention in that neighborhood.
Was that Highland Park created around the same time as PDC? Was that like the Parkland Dedication from that project?
The PDC is the city, so they didn't have Parkland Dedication,
from that.
but it's all of the new multifamily units. So this particular park is the multifamily above and below it, and then at the south of Highland, there's the South Highland Greenway, which is coupled with a fire lane. It's a really cool kind of layering of those two interventions. So rather than just an asphalt fire lane, there's a grass creek fire lane. You can barely see it. It's like used as parkland. So that's another kind of fun, exciting thing we do, is take away paved fire lanes.
I might add on to that and say that at this time, we kind of started with it, but we might have breezed past it. That the Parkland dedication is only tied to residential and hotel units right
I
now.
showed up a little late, so you.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, it would have been easy to miss that piece though. So the thing is that there are a few ordinances nationwide that tie to commercial development. And we are kind of looking at that for the future. That we don't have a mandate from council right now, but we do have some council members are interested in that. So we're thinking about it.
We have direction from our Parks Board to work through it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think we can just enter into a discussion,
Yeah, should we?
questions, we can
Do you want any other?
Yeah, let's do
do
it.
together.
Scott, Justin? We got gained one and lost one. And that is unchanged.
Our net is zero.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
So we just have to move this, right?
And is there anything sitting over here, we need to do as far as?
You guys will have audio. It'll have audio and everything.
Okay.
I think, will this pick up the audience question?
It will, yeah.
Oh, well, okay, good.
And do we have questions online too, maybe?
There was one that came through. Yeah. So I can do the online one first. And I'll post the questions. Okay. So the online one, I mean, it's a technical question about the walk shed analysis that you showed, that map there.
Okay.
A student wanted to know if any factors related to the quality of the pedestrian environment were taken into account, like even like presence of sidewalks or anything, or is it just like a straight, did you just like get the network from OpenStreetMap or something and then do the network analysis?
We built our own network using the city's. The city has its own street network, and we used that to build our own. And we did use some qualifiers, like if it was a major road that had a high speed limit was one, and then major highways and railroads that didn't have proper crossings were also factored in. If there was, an arterial like Burnett Road maybe, if there wasn't a proper crossing, that would be impacted in the network analysis. So yeah, we did include that. It's a great question and one that I think we're right to revisit, because the city has started making some really cool changes to the quality of the street network, with corridor mobility plan, and also council has started lowering the speed limit on a lot of different roads, which I think is great and will definitely help with that. So yeah, we don't factor in everything, but yeah, definitely the speed limits is a big one, crossings are a big one that we take a look at.
At one point, I thought we had a threshold of what that speed limit was. Do you remember what that was?
It was about 35 or 40 miles an hour, but basically anything that the city had qualified as a major arterial that had a higher speed limit on it is what we used. But yeah, I think we should start revisiting that. We may start revisiting that in the coming years.
Then if it exceeded that threshold, then it would not be included in the connectivity.
Yeah, it's a
analysis.
barrier at that point, the way a railroad.
And our qualitative assessment of that is, would you let your 8 or 10-year-old child walk to that park? No, you wouldn't? Okay, that's a barrier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we do go in manually and sort of try and comb through just the raw network analysis and clean it up so that it sort of more accurately reflects what's on the ground too. So it goes through a lot of scrutiny.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, Frankie?
Yeah, these thoughts are beautiful, folks. I was wondering if you could kind of speak on the decision-making planning process of what amenities are going to be included into the parks. I understand there's these restraints of space, use, things like that, but just basically like, where's the decision made to make a paved running trail versus flat ground skate ramps, or a tennis court versus a basketball court?
Right, yeah, so a lot of that, so we do have Parkland standards, so all of the amenities have to be sort of up to our standards, and public use is a lot different than a private use in terms of wear and tear, et cetera. So we do have kind of like a set of amenities that kind of are available, but we work directly with the developer who's sort of generating this need to identify the need of their residents in their development first, and they have a little bit of latitude as to what kind of goes in there. And then in some cases, like I have a case right now where the developer is actually working directly with the neighborhood in a little design charrette to say, what do you want to see in this park? And then it also depends on whether or not PARD will ultimately maintain the park, or if the developer wants to take on the maintenance of that. So it sort of depends on what kind of level and how fancy it gets, depending on how they want it.
Right, yeah, just a quick follow-up to Robin or whomever, in these design charrettes, who is designated as a member of the neighborhood, or like a resident? I'm assuming they have to have some sort of, home or apartment in the neighborhood, but, there's others, there's parks where people are entering from other neighborhoods because they are known that this is a particularly nice park, and I will take the time to go there. So I was just wondering who was going to be included.
I think the most efficient, most direct way of communicating is through the neighborhood association. So a lot of neighborhoods have that set up already, and so those leaders sort of reach out to everybody on the listserv that's signed up, and they also, I think, post through mediums like Nextdoor and Facebook groups as well to invite people to bring comments in. But yeah.
I think a lot of the times the land that we get dedicated sort of dictates the amenities that are possible. So oftentimes, because creeks and greenbelts are such a priority for us, that's what we get dedicated. And there's only so much you can do, it's not necessarily possible to put certain amenities in that area because it floods. So really, we started looking at like the types of trails that could be installed. If it is going to flood occasionally, then we'll recommend concrete just because it won't wash out, or some sort of binder or something like that. But yeah, I would say, to go off what Robin was saying, like standards, accessibility standards, and then the quality of the land, what kind of land we're getting, really end up dictating the amenities in many cases.
I might add just one more thing, and that is I feel like it's a little bit of a newer model to us, but we're pretty excited when we get contacted by a neighborhood in advance of a project. Sometimes they know it's a big piece of land. They might know that there's a creek or a floodplain. It might be a park deficient area, and so they start talking about what their interests are, and we've given this presentation to many neighborhoods, and I think that one message we want to get out to the neighborhoods is this is what the developer has to do anyway, and so like this is kind of their baseline. So if they come and they promise, well, we're going to dedicate this land, we're going to make this investment, it's like, well, they have to do that anyway. Maybe they can sweeten the pot a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe they can do something that the neighborhood really wants in this park that's over and above what they're required to do. So we hope to continue to get out there and educate and to have more conversations. And luckily, we haven't been in too many situations where different groups were saying, well, we want a sports court in the park, or we want a trail. Well, you can't have both. We hope that we can have, we may be in that situation at some point, and then we're going to really have to look at the constraints and see if we can do both.
I'll add, it's trails, at least in Austin, Texas, that's like number one. So we're always like safe to kind of use that as a guiding amenity, and then we have to realize we only have so much developer dollars and development dollars to kind of work with on that development. So sometimes we just want to create a place that maybe there's just open field play where kids can turn over rocks in the creek, and we consider that a real win as far as like the well-being of the new residents and the the surrounding community to go out into a park to shake off the city life and recreate.
And they can always be developed further by PARD in the future. So if there is a community need that arises, that comes to our attention through all of our community outreach efforts, and those PARD can kind of go back in and expend development dollars to further develop the park.
That's a great point, because I think, you know, a lot of times even we might think about the park as tied to the development. Well, actually, at the end of the day, it's deeded to the city. So it's parkland. Maybe you know, year one, there's a trail. Year two, a bond might come along and we might say, well, we would really like to have a shelter in addition to that. So, you know, we can do those things.
Yeah, kind of similar to what you were just saying. What avenues are there, if any, to like retrofit previously existing parks to be more accessible, or like more ADA aligned?
Yeah, I mean, we do that thought process for the new parks. I mean, I think we're always thinking, you know, can we make this ADA from the get-go? You know, with the topography in Austin, sometimes it's just not possible, but we make the effort for at least a portion of it to be ADA. As far as retrofitting for ADA accessibility, do you guys have any?
Well, we had someone dedicated to that project. She very sadly passed away a few months ago, but
No, we should remember her,
yeah,
Diane.
But so there is an effort, and there's an effort from our, I think, director and assistant director level to get all the parks up to a certain standard as in terms of accessibility. And again, not everything is gonna, because of all the hills, et cetera, not everything, but there should be at least some opportunity to enjoy the park. And we require all new developments dedicating parks to have an actual Texas accessibility specialist inspection, come out, provide a report that says you pass, before we'll accept the park, before we'll kind of release them of their obligations. So that is definitely on the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, our new parks, we now require like a specialist to come in and make sure that it passes a report on accessibility. So, you know, I had a park just last week where we went in and it says right here, you failed, like, you know, these slopes are too steep on the trails and what have you, and they had to redo it. So any new parks, you know, when they get dedicated, that's part of the requirements that they have this report that says, okay, this is an accessible park. And as far as retrofitting existing parks that we aren't getting dedicated, we did do quite an extensive inventory, I think 3 or 4 years ago, at the direction of our director and I think city council, to really see where we were meeting and failing, amenity by amenity. So I'm not sure, that's really more in our capital improvements department or division, but that's definitely something we've been working on and using funds to redo some of the equipment.
Yeah, and the development fees we could collect, I believe, can go toward those projects too. So, because it expands access into parks.
Perfect, thank you.
I have another question. Is there at any point in the Parkland dedication process where there's an assessment of how a revitalization effort or a redevelopment effort is going to affect the home values in the community, and especially in these projects in historically economically vulnerable communities and neighborhoods? I'm just wondering if, you know, there's this, you know, pre and post assessment of the value of the neighborhood, of home values, and, you know, just the new economic environment that's going to be created around the revitalization or redevelopment effort.
I think probably, I think we have to frankly answer no to that. That basically it's I think that we acknowledge that having a nice park nearby is probably going to increase values of homes, but we don't know. I mean, we also know that there are many other factors in it. So, you know, as having worked in zoning planning and things like that, I used to get various questions on, you know, is this going to increase the values? Is this going to decrease the values? And I could never enter into that game because if I said if I was even going to go out on a limb and say it's going to increase the values, then some people might not like that. But then if I said it's going to decrease the values, then some people wouldn't like that. So yeah, I guess that's a lot of answer. But any thoughts from you all?
I'll say that I think that's a great question, and I think that's something that that might be addressed better at the kind of zoning review stage. What we do as a team is focus really hard on, in our planning efforts when we're expending fees and acquiring parkland, is doing those demographic analysis and trying to invest in areas that are not currently under redevelopment, that have been historically underinvested in, that have a high concentration of children, a high population of people of color, things like that, so that we can sort of while this development is going on in other areas, continue investing and start investing in those communities. So that's the sort of effort we make, but we have those equity conversations every time we meet. And it's a tough subject in a city that's growing so rapidly. It's definitely.
There's a related follow-up on from a YouTube viewer that might be relevant. Gabby asked, what does engagement with underserved communities look like, and have fears of green gentrification and displacement come up in that engagement? I think is what you were kind of aiming at.
It came up quite a bit in our long-range plan, and I think what we tried to land on is to, you know, right-size projects for each community. You know, we recognize that there is an impact that parks have. I mean, I remember being in Dr. Oden's class and discussing, you know, how parks have an impact on real estate values, and I don't know if any of those studies are specific to Austin, but at the same time, you know, we're not trying to deprive residents of having a park either. So certainly if we have larger park investments like neighborhood parks or certainly any district or metropolitan parks, we do very extensive outreach and have vision plans. Like Zilker's not a great example necessarily, but you know, a park of that sort of scope will have a full engagement team to make sure that the project is sized appropriately to John Trevino is one that is maybe a better example. John Trevino Jr. is on the Colorado River a few miles out to the east, and you know, that was part of the conversation as well. So we really try to land in a sweet spot between, you know, meeting the needs of a community without, you know, having adverse impacts. And our community engagement unit does a great job with that, I think.
And again, we're oftentimes connecting communities, and you know, there's an argument that strengthens ties. I know most of the folks in my neighborhood from walking around. So when we're punching through creekways and this and that, we're actually connecting people who may or may not have ever known each other. And on that point, some things we do have to work through are maybe safety concerns, like you know, people are going to be walking there now, and we're all planners, and you know, so we have to kind of regurgitate Jane Jacobs to them, and we're bringing eyes to the street, so to speak, and we're bringing spontaneity, and we're bringing, in a sense, some more safety to areas that quite often would be a place of undesirable activity.
That's right.
But I guess the question of, you know, real estate values and how it interacts with parks and Parkland Dedication, we're in an interesting position because, you know, Parkland Dedication is a reflection of new real estate development. You know, these projects, these parks that we get are really following where new development is occurring, and we're bound to serve those residents by law, but also serve the existing community that's there. So it's, I think, you know, we're tied to gentrification in a sense, but it's one of many factors that, you know, I think is affecting Austin right now about like where should development take place, what does it look like, and what is the quality of life that should be part of that, while still preserving the residents and communities that are being affected by the extreme economic conditions we're seeing.
Kind of a window into our process too is that a lot of times when we're looking at a property that is developing and we're saying, and I'm looking at Alex because he had the original question, I should say Dr. Conrad, sorry. So that essentially we're seeing an area that is park deficient today. And so there is no park within 5 to 10 minute walking distance. And it really kind of, it brings a new neighborhood into our focus that we might not have looked at before. And so if we find that there, for some reason, that property could not accommodate a new park, we ask, where could there be a park in this neighborhood? Is there some piece of property that we could acquire that could turn into the new park? And hoping that is going to really be a quality of life issue for the folks in that neighborhood if they're not currently served by a park.
There was a follow-up comment from Gabby, just not really a question, but some feedback about the story map, and just the representation. She's noticing a lack of representation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the story map. So potentially something to consider moving forward, especially to kind of tackle these issues.
And that's actually discussions we've been having with our videographer and with our trails group is making sure that we're doing a better job with representation. A lot of times he brings his daughter out. She's just a cute little white girl, and that's kind of what's convenient to him. So we're working to expand that because that's absolutely an issue.
I wanted to kind of take us in a bit of a different direction and talk about a project that is near and dear to my heart, which is Interstate 35, the Interstate 35 expansion. So as I'm sure, and kind of take us in a little bit of a different direction from Parkland Dedication, but there's been proposals to cap and stitch part of the interstate during the expansion reconstruction. And it seems like, given the restrictions on use of these dedication fees, presumably no dedication fees can be used to support that part. But I'm curious what, what y'all's thoughts are just on the cap and stitch proposal, and B, what are there creative funding mechanisms that could be used, because it seems like TxDOT is not interested in supporting the cap and stitch, so we'd have to kind of bankroll it ourselves as a city. And just what your role would be if there were to be a cap and stitch proposal, what would you all do?
Well, I can start a little zoomed out, and then we can get to that, but I'm lucky enough to work with TxDOT every couple weeks and meet about the entire project, and where the Parks Department is really seeing this as a huge opportunity would be all of the creek crossings that move generally parallel to the highway. Walnut, Little Walnut, Williamson, Town Lake, Ladybird Lake, Slaughter, and on, Onion Creek. And we're making sure, we've been working decades stitching together parkland through there, and now we have this opportunity to work with TxDOT, and they're being very receptive thus far to when they rebuild these bridges to accommodate passage under there. So we're getting, all of these are going to be east-west connections. So we're having a lot of success there, and as you know, they have both sides of the highway, they're doing a 10-foot shared use path. And so how that trail then comes up to the shared use path, we're really proud of thus far. Whether we're going through a culvert, a tunnel, or an actual bridge. And so we are looking at we have parkland in place for a lot of those. Some of them we don't, and so we're reaching out to those folks, or maybe a lot of them are coming in through Parkland Dedication, because a lot of the areas are developing. We are making headway to really at least break down aspects of 35. As it gets closer to town, to the central, I think we're we're working in the same kind of good faith with multiple departments and TxDOT to really use this as an opportunity for pedestrian and access, and generally it is east-west. So yeah, right now whether it's going to be a stitch or a cap when you're talking about the downtown area, you know, we see that as interesting and possibly an effective way to get to minimize the autoped conflict and maybe get even to our Waterloo Greenway from the east side and vice versa, or up from the Lady Bird Lake Trail. We don't exactly know how the maintenance will play out should caps be decided on, but we are fighting very hard to what little parkland we have, Palm Park, and we have some other aspects of how they touch those caps so that we can really make it feel like a park without any grade change, without any you know, roadways. So we see some aspects as just giant opportunities. We don't exactly know how it's going to shake out or how it's going to fund. I mean, I do think it's above my pay grade, but you know, when you have the president passing, you know, infrastructure plans that specifically talk to infrastructure that divides cities, well, someone better be looking into that. Does anybody else want to?
Well, I want to take a second and brag on Justin for all the work he's done on this. He really thinks about this a lot, and I mean, I think we as planners, we just need to acknowledge the great economic and racial and just the inequality that has been established by 35 of a division of the city that probably should not have ever happened. And hopefully, and now what we're trying to do is to try to bridge some of those gaps however we can. So I think that, you know, in the first part of Justin's statement, he's talking about going under the highway. So going, you know, finding ways under, you know, culverts, all these different things. He's got some really interesting ideas on that. And then the other issue here is that at the end of the day, it's going to still be considered, we think it's still going to be considered right-of-way. So by that sense, it is not a park. However, it is public. So, I mean, you know, sort of working out the status of what that is, but I mean, I'm really just repeating what you just said, but kind of putting it into a slightly different language to say,
Sounds so much better when he says it.
to say that we're committed to working hand in glove with, say, a, you know, Austin Transportation Department, TxDOT, whatever other agencies there are to ensure that it's a public realm. And so essentially that if it is not a park, that it feel like a park. It wouldn't be us maintaining it, but we would hope to connect to it in different places so that it really feels like a seamless type of thing.
There's one online. Yeah, so Jonathan has a question online. Housing affordability advocates and developers worry that Parkland Dedication fees increase the cost of building housing. The fees have gone up. The fees went up last year. How do you all take into account housing affordability when setting the fees each year? I don't know if you all set the fees directly or how those are set.
It's city council who sets the fees, but there is a code requirements for what the fees should be. So when we passed the latest ordinance, when the city council passed the latest ordinance, it fixed the price of parkland to the fees. So we take an average of 5 years what it costs the city to purchase new parkland. So that's what controls the fee amounts, and then council approves those at budget, over the summer, I think. But affordability is definitely something that we work through a lot with our housing and planning department. And right now, any dwelling units, any homes that are built that are certified affordable under the smart housing provision that's managed by our housing department, those are exempt from the requirement, so they won't pay any fees, they won't necessarily have any requirements, which can be difficult. There are occasions where we don't want to deprive future residents of affordable housing of Parkland either, so really we start to get creative to make sure that we're bringing Parkland to affordable housing. We're working with HACA, Justin's working very closely with HACA. I work with HPD on some of their affordable housing projects to basically have a partnership where we're buying parkland with fees in lieu from the area right next to where housing is going to have an affordable housing project. One of them is on Tillery Street, that's getting going right now. But we recognize the tension there. It's definitely come up a lot with city council and our real estate advocates lately, and we recognize that there are a lot of different pressures when it comes to real estate development in the city.
And just a little insight on the cost per acre that is modeled on. In 2020, the cost per acre was $63,000 an acre, was sort of the average cost of what it costs to purchase or acquire parkland. A lot of that is in the floodplain. That's pretty low. You wouldn't be able to find anything for $63,000 an acre. I think now it's $166,000 an acre. That was that sort of fee increase, and that's because over time the cost of land has increased in Austin. So we're also affected by the increase of land cost. But $166,000 is still not going to buy you an acre of land inside the city. We're looking more at several million for small parcels that are right in the urban core. So it's still hard for us to keep up with. We still have to augment those fees with bond funding. So when we're kind of talking about the impact to the cost of housing from the Parkland Dedication fee, I think that it's actually sort of like a funny a line to draw, because really the cost of parkland is still, the value of parkland is still much lower than what it would cost the developer to actually purchase that land. And you can sort of look at other housing markets. So Parkland Dedication primarily will affect sort of the new build, but old houses that are being resold on the market are still up 40% from last year. So even houses that are being resold that have no Parkland Dedication fees are being sold at a much higher price. So I think it's hard to actually draw a straight line between those two things.
And I would say, I mean, a big part of our job is working with civil engineers and the developers themselves to minimize any impacts to their housing. Coming up with really unique configurations, getting creative. Robin just went through an amazing experience recently with Board of Appeals to basically maximize additional affordable units through Parkland Dedication, because it justified the reasoning in the community's eyes to have more affordable housing exactly because there's a park. So often, parkland can be a catalyst to increase density and increased affordability.
Well said. Just wanted to talk about, kind of lift the curtain a little bit. When we tell a developer that they're going to owe land because the 4 or 5 or 6 of us planners have gotten together and said, we need to get land here, there's usually that, oh, you're kidding me, from the developer side. And then, after you kind of get through that, there is this real kind of, generally, there are some really enjoyable working meetings where you're really getting just really wonderful collaborative efforts to come up with the best scenario. So I just wanted to express that, because our job is hard, but sometimes there are just incredibly creative moments. And it goes a lot to say of this team, but also kind of how we interact with developers. But any of us could pick up any of our projects that we have running right now and take it the next step. And we all review things as a team, and I think we kind of round when a stone goes down the river, it kind of knocks off the edges, and we usually come up with something collectively that none of us could have really come up with on our own. And so, and I would extend that kind of a collaboration to a lot of the developers we work with. Once they kind of swallow the pill that we're going to need something here, we often come up with something great.
I'd take a second to brag on Robin and basically how she you know, the case that we were just talking about, taking it to the Board of Adjustment, and essentially that was just a real win-win in that situation, because they're going to be ending up with more entitlements to build higher and more units, and also a park. So it came down to the idea that if you could bend the code a little bit to allow for this slightly more height, that the new residents could get a park and the existing residents could get a park to enjoy.
Yeah, so we removed the compatibility setback is what happened, so it went from 3 stories to 4 or 5 stories. In many cases, the neighborhood was all on board, and we went from a half-acre park to a full acre park because we were able to densify, and the developer got 100 more units, which resulted in 10 more affordable units. So it was really a win-win, and the Board of Adjustment, a lot of them sort of commended the developer for their work with the neighborhood and with Park to get all on the same page for that. So we hope to use that as a model in the future. It's very exciting to think we could densify and provide more open space on the ground.
But we know, we want to acknowledge too that we're going to continue to get questions on our fees, and we're going to continue, and we want to be transparent about what our fees are, where they come from, where they are in the code, and then what they're used for at the end of the day. So we know we got that question today. We're going to continue to get that question, and we're happy to answer it.
Frank, did you have one more?
Yeah. So I'm just reflecting on the walk shed graphic a little bit, and I had class with Alex yesterday, and we had a CRP PhD student, Kaylin Levine, come in and lead this discussion on accessibility, and she had a very interesting statistic, and forgive me, it's a little dated, 2016, but if my notes are correct, 49% of Austin's sidewalk network is missing. Understanding that that was 6 years ago, I think we can all kind of understand as Austinites that the sidewalk is still incomplete pretty significantly. So this is kind of almost a concurrent struggle with bringing green space and parkland to communities that haven't had that opportunity historically. And so again, kind of reflecting on the walk shed, what are the challenges in creating this accessibility to this green space and to the parkland, knowing that there's sidewalks missing, and it's hard for folks that don't have, cars, vehicles, those that can't make the walk, can't make the walk safely or physically can't make the walk. What are the challenges that the Parks and Rec department are running into with this sidewalk network issue?
It's a great question. I mean, we do definitely factor in, like I said, major roadways that often don't have adequate sidewalks as part of the analysis to have that reflected in the service areas from this walk shed. I guess we do work with transportation and the Public Works Department quite a bit on where there are deficiencies in terms of sidewalks or trails. So we work with Urban Trails a whole lot over in Public Works, and we work with ATD a little bit with Safe Routes to School. So we recognize that there are a lot of challenges to walking around in Austin. I don't own a car. I'm biking and walking everywhere. But we also see that there's a lot of opportunity right now too with the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan, Safe Routes to School, the recent bond funding that went in for urban trails as well. It is always improving, and we work through Parkland Dedication. Robin summarized how we use connectivity as a major part of that, and always making sure that any connections that we do make to our parks is going to be accessible to Texas accessibility standards. Honestly, my biggest frustration with our network analysis in Washington is you get these parts of town where there's the streets and the sidewalk, they don't connect. It's like you gotta go 2 miles out to get to another park that it'd take a crow, 5 minutes to fly to, or the grackle, as the grackle flies. Thank you, Rob. So that's a big difficulty for us, especially with older subdivisions where, maybe we'd get a great punch out, or if we bought this easement to get a trail here, it could work beautifully, but sometimes it's not so easy, and there could be dozens of homes that we would be impacting in order to realize that. But definitely looking for those opportunities where it's like, hey, if we could just get this one little trail, at the end of this cul-de-sac, we could have hundreds of homes, or this apartment complex can finally get to a new park. And the example Robin pulled up at Georgian Acres is such a beautiful one. And that was also a project, affordable housing project, where we worked with them, and they were very happy to improve access to all the apartment complexes just south of Georgian Acres Park.
I guess I would say that Tom is the one who elevated our analysis. So he brought, it originally was as a crow or a grackle flies, and he developed that network tool. I think that my planner nerd fantasy, or the next step, if you will, is to take some of the fine data that you're talking about, where, if there's the 2022 analysis of what every sidewalk looks like right now, that we plug that into our network analyst and we say, okay, that takes off, what we thought was what we actually have more park deficiency, because we see that those sidewalks are substandard or not there, and now we have a more up-to-date, sophisticated view of what the park deficiency is. So maybe that's a PR project for somebody, that they can take our data and they can take the sidewalk data and they can put those two together.
Great. Well, I think that's a good place to end. So let's thank our presenters.
Thank you for having us. This was
Thanks so
wonderful.
much.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you for all the good questions.
Great
Very good
discussion.
questions.
Yeah, great discussion. We did have a max of like 15 people on YouTube streaming, so.
Oh, nice.
All right.
So, yeah. It's just, like I said, this was our first kind of dual mode of
Yeah.
so